All right, today's scripture is found in Psalm, and we're reading chapter 15. This is titled, Who Shall Dwell on Your Holy Hill? A Psalm of David. O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does what is right, and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, and does no evil to his neighbor, nor takes up reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest, and does not take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. So today's psalm starts out with two questions that really are rhetorical. He's asking, who can come and abide in your tent? Who can hang out with you in your presence? Who's allowed in there on a temporary basis? Because if you're talking about a tent, the traveler, the woe, they're there temporarily and then they're gone. But then he questions even further. He looks at, the temple on the holy hill, more of a permanent residence that someone may stay for a long period of time. Who is it that has such worth, that is so worthy to come before you? What does this man look like that can come before you, Lord, and rest in your presence? And then from there, really what we see is this breakdown of a list of characteristics of what this person might look like, the type of character that this person would have to display or that should display in order to be in God's holy place. So from there, it goes another level and it says, okay, here were the characteristics, but now how is this person going to respond in difficult situations? How are they going to treat other people that may be against them? Or how are they going to handle their money? What kind of integrity does this person have? And then lastly, it really talks about the blessings that this person of such great character would have upon them because of how they held themselves. And part of that is not ever being moved, that shall never be moved, meaning that they're not going to be pushed around, but that they're going to be protected, that they're going to have this abundance of blessings because of the fact that they withheld through these trials and they had such great character before God. Now, as you read through this, you might be questioning the same way that I did, thinking, well, wait a second, this is talking about someone of good character and what they do in order to be in God's presence. Well, what we have to take into context is that there was an old covenant, and now we are living in a new covenant because of Jesus. Now, this is a huge relief because I'm sure that you're feeling the same way that I am, that if it was ever based on my personal performance, there's no way I would have been allowed in that tent into God's presence. But the beautiful thing about Jesus saving us and coming into the world, allowing us to have this new covenant with Christ, that he was the reason that we are now able to have that personal relationship with God, that we can live in a way that is overflowing with grace, and that no matter what our performance, although we strive to be this person that David speaks of, that we will fall short because of our humanness, because of our sin, and yet Jesus has allowed us that ticket into the tabernacle to stay as long as we want to rest in God's presence. So for today's passage of scripture, we are going to be really focusing on the tent. And so as we jump into the creating part, I want to create the illusion of a curtain, of a tent opening. And so I've got it sketched out here in my Bible, but I know it's going to be very difficult to see. So I'll be jumping onto a piece of paper here to do some of the teaching, and then I'll do a little time lapse so that you can watch me process what it is going to look like here on the page. But just to get started, I've got a simple stencil and I'm looking for something that has a nice pattern to it. I think smaller patterns are going to work a little bit better for the technique I'll show you. I also have some scribble sticks, which are new to me, but these would be also very similar to like a distress crayon, or even a gelato would work fine because we're going to do some work with stenciling with those gelatos. And then I have an arrangement of just some colored pencils to kind of fit the same tones. I'm going to be working with some blues and greens for our curtain. So if you want to gather a few things together, I will get started here in just a second on a practice piece of paper. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do on my practice sheet here, just so that you can kind of get your bearings of what I'm doing, I'm going to pretend that I'm working on just one half of my Bible page here. So this is just a simple outline. You can imagine my Bible being opened up like that. And what I'm going to try to do is to create this illusion that there is a piece of curtain being pulled back, almost like you would tassel back or tie back a curtain. And it's going to give that illusion like I can walk into the tent, like God has invited me in. So what I'm going to start with, though, is this section right in here where things are going to be tied together. So let me go ahead and zoom in for just a second, because what we want to do here is to work with what would be considered a rope. In order to do a rope, now of course I would be doing this in pencil, so just have a mechanical pencil or a good pencil nearby. And what you're going to do is start with two parallel lines, slightly curved, but at the end here you want to definitely make a little curved ending. And this is going to give the kind of like that end part of where the curtain kind of gathers together. But if we want to turn this into a rope, what I do is to create this very shallow S shape. And I don't mind if I'm going over. In fact, you should kind of go over where those initial lines are at. And we kind of repeat this pattern over and over. You can see it's kind of bubbled here, and I can go back in and kind of bubble these out as well. And then I'll close that off. I can then, if I want to add some extra texture to it as well, I can come in with some extra little added lines. These would be also fine if you were doing some colors to do your darker color on one side or the other of this rope, and it just kind of gives it a little 3D dimension. And then the same thing would be true if we wanted to have some longer, like the ends where the ties are coming down. So again, I would just go ahead with parallel lines going in the direction I would want. Maybe end with some sort of a little knot and some tassels. But we'll just use that same shape, that kind of shallow S, twisting line, all the way down, bubble them out. And of course we would use our pencil so we could erase any of those sketched lines ahead of that we had at first there. And then if you want to trace with Sharpie or just simply use a different colored pencil to do your work, I think that would be just fine. Okay, so going ahead with what we just talked about over here, I'm going to just sketch in approximate area where I'm going to have that tie back. I might have actually bring that out just a smidge more, and then I'll just kind of show myself where that's going to be. Now, of course, I'm just sketching this for you guys so that you can see what the plan is. There we go. Some tassels, rope, 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 and there it is. Now, talking about the actual curtain. Now, we're going to do two different things. We're going to try to achieve depth, which means there's some ebb and flow to our curtain. We know if we're working with material, the material kind of gathers together, and there's going to be creases. Some areas are lighter where they kind of come up towards the light, and then those hidden valleys of where the material folds together is going to be much darker. But the other thing we want to do is to make this fancy. So we're going to be using a stencil to create kind of an illusion of a pattern, and that's going to be kind of interesting. So there's two ways in which we're going to achieve this. First is in the actual shape. So we want to make sure that the curtain, as it's going up here, overstretches wide. We know that the curtain kind of gathers together, which means that the bottom half of this curtain is going to be much skinnier, and it may flow much straighter, where this one may end up coming out. We also want to make sure that we actually sketch in some of these kind of what I would call like a V shape wherever there's going to be folds happening. And some of those V shapes might kind of come closer together here where it's the most material. I wouldn't necessarily do this all the way across, but I would do a few, and even if they are partial V's, like something like that, or little pieces coming up, this is really just to help you to remember where things are going to be. So this is part one, is separating it with those creased lines. You can definitely do the same thing down in here. Give yourself some gathered marks or some creases. And of course, this is our sketch, so it's going to be a little rough. And then you'll have a lot more room to play once you get onto your Bible. So number one way to achieve a curtain is to create those actual creases. The second way that we're going to create those creases are with our choice of color. So for instance, I'm going to be working with some blues and kind of blue-greens, and I'll show you what I've got here to work with. So I have some distressed crayons, more of a teal and then a kind of a mint color, along with a heavy dark blue. And then in my scribble sticks, I have a couple of brighter blues, one that's kind of teal, and then we've got 2 tones that are darker. I'm not really sure what I'm going to work with here, so let's go ahead and make ourselves a color swatch. And I think this is really important to do when you're working with materials and you are trying to find, you know, like a light, medium, and dark, so that you can see what each of your colors looks like. So I may just do something like this for myself, laying those out there. So you can see that one is much heavier. It's a good medium tone. Actually, it has some rich color. And of course, this is going to be the lighter. Let's see in comparison then to our distressed crayons. That's a nice green. I think this is a good practice, no matter what material you're working with, just to give yourself a little swatch. Ooh, that's nice and dark, isn't it? That one's just slightly lighter, but a nice difference in tone. So we've got quite a bit of tones to work with, but what we're going to try to decide here is where we want our lightest and brightest color to be, because that's really what we're going to start with. So I'm going to say that we're really these 3 here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them. Actually, let me see. I'm going to use that in mid-tone. Let's go with this. So I have got these 3 colors as my light tones. So I'm going to go ahead and get some color on here. And I do like to use a little sponge. And I'm a big fan of kind of coloring on my sponge first, because I think it creates a nice clean smudge effect. It doesn't have as many streaks in it. So I may just go ahead and start to fill in those light tones. Now, this might be a little tedious for some of you because you're thinking, man, I just want to get this colored. I don't want to spend too much time building up layers. So if that's the case, that's where these scribble sticks are really great. They'll still spread for you, but you can be much more like you're coloring in a coloring book with a crayon or colored pencil. So you have a little more control. So what I'm focusing on are the lighter colors first, because we always want to work light to dark, okay? And so I'm thinking about where I put those lines, and I'm coloring the lighter areas and kind of avoiding these heavier areas, because these are going to be the creases that are folds in, and that's where I'll do the darker tones. So let's just focus on this section for now. And of course I can come in here and switch it up a little bit, give us a little bit of green tints. I love mixing colors together, especially if they're just tones apart, just because it gives it a little extra variety. So I can probably smooth this out slightly. It's probably not going to make too much of a difference. And then what I'm going to do is map out the darker colors. So here in between are where these folds get kind of heavy down in between, especially down in here where it all gathers together, adding in some of those dark areas. And then what I'll do is I will be using the mid-tone, so something like this color, and let's see, I think this one was a good one. That was our really dark, this guy here. So what I'll do now is I'll kind of come on this edge right where the 2 meet, and I'm going to add in and really color right over those lines that I created, and create kind of this idea that we've gone slowly shading from light to dark. So I've gone light in the middle, medium, and now I've got right into my dark, and now I need to come out the other side with medium as well. Then I've got my light, I'm going to avoid, medium, right into the dark, medium again on the out, and then back up to the light, medium, dark, medium. And you can see how in time, as you kind of work and blend, you're going to create this illusion like the fabric is coming together and that there's highs and lows within your fabric, and you'll really be able to show the folds. All right, so now that we've kind of got that illusion going on here, I want to talk about where this stencil comes into place. Now, I strongly suggested to you at the beginning of the video to find something that has a smaller print because we are working in small spaces. And if you do have a very big print, you won't actually see the pattern. So the smaller the print is better in this case. And I'm going to go ahead and start with this, this kind of lighter, more flat open space. I think that's going to be the easier part to be in. And I'm going to try here a couple of different, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to try a couple of different colors. I'll add a little bit of green. I'm definitely going to use my distressed crayons for this. These sticks are really nice, but it's a little bit harder to color on the pad. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix a little tone. Now, I'm not looking to have a really strong pattern. What I'm looking to have is just a little bit of difference, almost like a tone on tone. And I'm using this in kind of a, you can see I'm kind of turning it and scrubbing that way rather than going back and forth. I tend to find that to be a little bit easier to use. And so there you can then see that pattern coming through. So not a huge difference in color, and it certainly didn't look like it, did it, when I had it over. It's always kind of, it's a little hard to notice what we're doing. Now, when we see pattern in folds, we're going to see that separately. So do not lay this over and just go crazy over the top, because you might kind of flatten it out. You won't allow it to kind of have those curves. So what I do is in separate sections. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to add a little bit more, and it's really blending too the colors that are underneath it when I'm doing this. Let's see what we've got here and see if we can see any difference. So see just a tiny bit of pattern there. I'm going to go ahead and reload, and I'll move it again. Remember, every time you're going to want to pick this up and move your pattern just slightly, and then just be real careful where you're putting it here. Twisting, twisting. Give yourself a tiny bit of pattern. It's just enough to make the point of that curtain having a similar pattern. And I love something that makes it look a little more royal and official. There we are. Okay, so I hope that you enjoy this technique, and I hope that this is something that you'll be able to achieve with the materials that you have. A couple pointers real quickly about stencils. Stencils can be very expensive, but please don't spend your money on them. There's all sorts of stencils out there. You got to get creative thinking about different papers or packaging or ways to make them so that it's a little bit more cost efficient. One simple thing to do, if you have an onion bag or a potato bag, there's a great material there, the mesh, that makes great stencils you can use. And you can also use hole punches in your paper and create something just that's kind of a polka dot texture. So definitely have be creative with your stencils. Don't spend a fortune. I find all sorts of stencils and collect them every time I see them for inexpensive, and I love to make them as well. So I encourage you to do the same, and stay tuned as we kind of speed up this process and you can see me put this curtain together in my Bible. All right, and last now as our finishing touch is our little tassel here, our rope. So I'm going to go ahead and actually use a little eraser. If you do have some of your colors kind of going over it, if you have a nice white poly eraser like this one here, you can usually pick up quite a bit of color with that, even if, unless it's like a marker. Usually most materials are going to come off pretty easily, just to give yourself a little fresh area. And especially with this, we don't want it to turn too green on us using the yellow and the blue together. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the top of this with kind of a brighter yellow. And then as I come down, I'll go more into like a orangey gold color. So I'm kind of using that as this bright yellow as my light area. Let's go in here with like a small bit of orange just to fade it in the middle here. Just enough to give it a little shot of color. Not too much. There we go. Hope you enjoyed putting your curtain together. It's a fun process, and I like seeing it come together. I hope you enjoy it as well. Then I'm going to go back through here and kind of just soften this orange up. and use that gold. And this is a metallic colored pencil. There's all sorts of metallic colored pencils. I think you are pretty safe to just go, average. I don't think you have to spend a whole lot to get a nice metallic, but that way you have a little shine every now and then. And it's nice because it's more on the neutral side and it kind of tones things down for you. So, all right. So there we are with our curtain. And of course, we'll finish up the page with some words as well. I think this is really a passage that really is, because it's that old covenant side of it. You think about it now. And I think that something about resting in God's presence, or asking or thanking God, or asking Him to be allow you in His presence, that's really the direction that I'll be going. So I'll make sure that I post the finished page here to the end of the video, and also on our Facebook page as always. But I'm sure glad you tuned in for this week's passage in Psalm 15, and I hope that you're enjoying your read through. Don't worry about where you are or how far you are behind. Just keep plugging along. God's going to bless you for the reading that you're doing, and I am so thankful to have you here along the journey with me.